Καλησπέρα σας, καλοί φίλοι τηλεθεατές. Καλώς ορίσατε στην εκπομπή μας Faces, Πρόσωπα. And I have to turn to English straight away. Welcome to our program Faces. I have a special person here tonight, and I just want to welcome him. Welcome, Mr. Edmunds.
Edmunds, yes, that's good.
How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
You know, my program is about biographies, you know, who are you and what you do. So I'm going to start with who are you? I mean, a short biography.
Okay. I was born in the United Kingdom. I was educated here. I went to Cambridge University, where I was an undergraduate and read natural sciences, which is physics and chemistry and mathematics and so on. I did a doctorate at the Observatories and Institute of Astronomy in Cambridge on the chemical composition of stars, what stars are made of. Mm-hmm. I then went to the University of Cardiff, and I've in fact remained basically all my professional life in the University of Cardiff. I was successively a lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, professor, head of department, and now retired, although I'm an Emeritus Professor there, and I still, in fact, do some teaching in the university there.
Mm-hmm. Family-wise?
Family, I have a wife and 2 children, although the children are big now, and they both have children themselves, so I'm a grandfather. Very happy grandfather.
Of course. You know, physics, my daughter is studying physics. It's a very difficult subject, okay?
Well, is it so difficult? Some people find it hard, and it does have hard things about it. But I think sometimes it's felt to be. I think sometimes its difficulty is overemphasized. There are bits of it that are very hard, but a lot of physics can be understood quite well. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the great things in recent years is that there have been some very good books published on a lot of physics, which anybody can pick up and get a lot from. Okay, the mathematics may be difficult and some of the more technical details, but you can get a lot of the general gist of what's going on in modern physics, and a lot of it's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. What makes you decide to go and study physics and at the same time astrology?
Well, physics, yes. Astrology, no. Astronomy.
Astronomy, sorry. It's my fault, yes. Astrology is only for, those who are dealing with talking about their future and all this kind of thing?
Indeed, essentially these days. Although, of course, looking back in history, astronomy and astrology were much more closely aligned. Mm-hmm. Although it's very interesting, even going back to the Greek era, Hellenic era, when astronomy was practiced a lot in Greece, the great astronomer, one of the great astronomers, Ptolemy, who you've heard of, did both astronomy and astrology. Mm-hmm. But most peculiarly, he seemed to keep the two completely apart almost.
Why is that? What is the difference?
Well, astronomy has to do with looking in a rational way at the motion of the stars and the planets and trying to explain what's out there and trying to predict their motions and so on. Okay. Astrology has to do with saying, well, those motions and what we see can be interpreted in what's going on in history or in everyday life. You know, your Mars is in the wrong constellation for you today. Be very careful when you go out because you're about to be run over or something.
Oh my God, touch wood.
Yeah, I will just check that, shall I? But so one is studying the universe. The other is thinking that indications in the sky have direct relevance for everyday life. Now, we no longer believe that is true. At one time it was believed that that's true, but even as I say, in Greek times, those two were kept apart. There's a lovely saying from a historian of science who once talked about the Romans, because the Romans were very much into astrology, more so than the Greeks. And he said, well, the Greeks know about astrology, but the Romans believe it.
Mm-hmm. So you still haven't told me why and how you decide to get into this. I mean, it was any special reason, or I mean...
I was interested in science at school and mathematics, and many other subjects too. I knew that I wanted to study science, so I went to university to study science. But I only really got into astronomy in my final year at as an undergraduate. I knew I wanted to do some research or go on and to do research. I was looking around to see what was interesting. And I really settled on two things. One was on possibly going into meteorology, telling the weather. So perhaps it was, used to be a kind of astrology, perhaps. Meteorology, or going into study astronomy. And at that time, astronomy sounded more exciting, so that's what I went into.
So, astronomy, science in society activity, this phrase, give us more about this, explanation, just for me and our audience.
Yes. Ever since I was a postgraduate, I've been interested in taking science out into the community. As we were talking a minute ago about physics being difficult. Well, yes, bits of it are, but I still believe that the average person can understand a great deal about science if they want to. And science in society activity, what I would mean by that is providing the opportunities and the motivation and the possibilities of anybody being able to learn about science if they want to. Not having to go to university to do that, but being able to take an intelligent interest through television, through lectures, through talks, through magazines, through whatever it was. And when I was, in fact, I started when I was a postgraduate. I went out into the wilds of the countryside around near the university in Cambridge. And I used to go out and talk to the farmers about astronomy. In later years, I in fact got involved with the national programs through the research councils in the United Kingdom, for two particular research councils in the United Kingdom, and took on some responsibility for their science and society programs. And I very much enjoyed that and still believe it's a very, very worthwhile thing to do.
And okay, now you are still working on the subject, or you retire?
I've been retired. I just can't believe it. I've been retired nearly 10 years now, officially. But maybe academics never really retire. And during that time, I've done quite a lot of lecturing still, teaching in the university. But I've also kept on some research. I don't really research in what was my prime research area, which was on the physics of galaxies, particularly the chemical composition of galaxies and how the chemical elements build up over time, and observing what is the composition of external galaxies and so on. That was my main research career. But about 15 years or so ago, I got more and more interested in the history of science. My wife says it's because I'm more part of it, but I don't know if that's true. But I got more interested in the history of science, and that really got me into the Antikythera research program. And I'd always had an interest in the history of science to some extent, but in the last 15 years, that's what I've worked on. I still do some work in the researching into the history of science. At the moment, I'm doing a little bit of work on the foundation of the Royal Astronomical Society in the 1820s, which is rather obscure, but quite fun to wander around in the early 19th century.
Is latest technology has to do with, astronomy? What is the connection?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The latest technology, computers and all these mobiles and all this, latest technology, which I don't understand, has anything to do with, astronomy?
Well, yes, the technology has always, to some extent, driven astronomy, and astronomy in its turn has driven technology as well. Advances these days in, for example, in imaging methods used in astronomy had great repercussions on the kind of cameras we have these days, for example. But always what has happened, really since the invention of the telescope is probably the best way of looking at it. Once the technology that allowed the telescope to be invented obviously helped astronomy. And since that time, new ways of observing the universe, detecting radiation from the universe of various kinds. Light to begin with, then radio waves, then X-rays, and then most spectacularly over the last 2 or 3 years, the detection of gravitational waves. Now, these are phenomenal technological accomplishments and tell us a great deal more about the universe. But there's an interplay there in that the technology being used in astronomy feeds back into producing more technology and so on. So it's a sort of good coexistence between technology and astronomy. But it is true, if you look over the history of astronomy, when there's been an advance in technology, there's almost inevitably been an advance in observational astronomy. And that particularly has been true since the 1960s, when satellites began to go up above the atmosphere, and one could then observe at things that you couldn't do from the ground. And there's been a huge explosion in astronomical knowledge since that time.
Mm-hmm. So you retire, but you're still active. I mean, you are an external examiner. For some universities, you're still doing that? Or?
I don't actually externally examine anymore. I stopped that a year or two ago, but I do work still in education to some extent. What I've been engaged in the past few years on curricula, how courses should be arranged, what we should be teaching, how we should be teaching it, both at university level and most recently at school level too. Trying to make science more useful, more exciting, more approachable, more relevant, more interesting for those who study it, and particularly for those who don't study it, to encourage people to take a real interest in science and understand where it comes from and understand the excitements that it has.
You wrote some books, I suppose. Would you mind telling us what the subjects are?
I've edited various books over the time, and I've written a great many scientific articles, but I've never really got down and written a whole book. One of these days, perhaps I'll get round to it.
Okay, so you didn't write your own book yet?
No.
But it's important. I mean, all these things you're went through, it's good to put them in a book and, give it the chance to people who wanted to know about this subject, about astronomy.
Some people have a knack of writing books. I find I can write, but I find it quite hard to write well. And I always have great envy of people who can sit down and just write books. But there are many very good science books around at the moment, for both at popular and at technical level.
Yes. Now you have more time, I suppose, to do some other activities. What do you do to pass your time if there is any free time?
Well, yes, I do quite a lot of other things. I've various passions. I walk a lot.
Which is good, yeah.
Healthy. This is healthy too, but I'm in the countryside or on mountains, or I walk with friends quite often. I always normally do one fairly long walk every week. At the moment, we're doing some friends and I are doing a thing called the Cotswold Way on the Cotswold Hills in England in little bits. So I do a lot of walking. I sail. I have a boat. I share a boat with some friends on the Bristol Channel. Good. So I go sailing there, which can be pretty scary at times.
Can you fish as well? I mean, fishing?
No fishing. Just sailing. I'll let the fish swim.
Yes,
I don't want them to eat me if I fall in. So.
You just watch them. You don't eat them.
No, and I hope they won't eat me.
Oh no, I don't think so.
I also very interested in music. I love music. So
you listen to music.
Listen to music. I used to sing in a choir quite a lot.
That's good.
But nowadays I tend to listen rather than earlier this year I bought myself a bass guitar as well.
You start playing the guitar as well?
I did play the guitar a bit before, but now I play the bass as well.
That's very good. So, but you have interest in old railways as well?
Yes.
In which extent? I mean, go and view them, or just
if I have a chance, I will go and look at old railways. Yes, and I read a lot on that, and I have a guilty secret too, which is that I do like making little models of trains too. So I belong to a model railway club too, and do
How
make some
you make
models.
them? I mean, with wood, with what?
With brass. Some from kits, some I buy, some I make. I think it comes from my father. My father was a railwayman, and when I was young, he used to take me sometimes
for rides
and I got interested at that time. So and in a way, it's quite good because to do something with your hands. I've tended to be a theoretical astronomer or a theoretical historian, although I have done experimental work as well. To do something with your hands, to make something, is always very good.
Interesting, and keep you, active and,
yes, it makes you much better at do-it-yourself stuff, but then you never have time to do the do-it-yourself because you're too busy making models. But
that's all right. Yes. So, is there anything else you want to add? I mean, is anything that I didn't ask you and you want our audience to know?
Only perhaps why science is important.
Well, this is a question that I missed. So, why science is important?
Because it allows to see the world rationally and evidence-based. In other words, to do things and follow things because you can work it out in a rational way and you can use observation and experiment to understand deeply the way things are. And I'm not saying science is the answer to everything. Human problems are human problems. But if we were a bit more rational and a bit more evidence-based in what we did, the world, I believe, would be a much better place.
That'd be better, yeah.
Even in political terms, one worries about things that are going on around the world at the moment in lots of places and in surprising countries. And a bit more rationality and a bit more reliance on evidence would, I think, be a very good thing.
Yes. Do you do any lectures? I mean, in front of audience?
Yes.
Except of, universities and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
You do any lectures for other people as well?
I do quite a lot of lectures on the history of astronomy, in particular on the Antikythera mechanism. And I do some other scientific talks. So I also do a one-man play occasionally based on the life of Sir Isaac Newton. Which perhaps explains the hair somewhat. So.
No, you mean what do you mean? Give us more information about this one-man play. What do you mean? I mean,
it's a play. It takes about an hour, and I dress
very
up.
Interesting.
I dress up in costume, and it's Sir Isaac Newton is at the end of his life, and he's looking through his letters because he left. One of the things about Isaac Newton, he left a phenomenal amount of correspondence, his writings. Most of them now, fantastically, are available on the web. And in the last recent years, there's been a huge project to put all his papers on the web. It's millions of words. Anyway, he's at the end of his life, and he's looking through his letters. And it's just him talking about his life, what he's done, and through his letters. And you get some idea of what sort of person he actually was through his letters. He wasn't actually a very nice man. He was a very interesting man and a brilliant man, but not necessarily somebody you would have necessarily wanted to have dinner with.
You wrote the play?
Yes. It's based on, I wrote it, yes, but it's all based on his letters.
Okay, based on your letters. Is that the biography, short biography?
No, based on Isaac Newton's letters, or letters that he wrote or were written to him.
That's fine. I mean, is there any comedy in it as well, or just...
A little.
Yes. A little?
Yes.
Well, I'm very interested to see the play. I mean, where are you performing this?
I only do it about 3-4 times a year. I did it twice so far this year, or 3 times this year, I think. Once in Cardiff, I did it once in Chicago, and once in mid-Wales. So.
In Chicago?
Yes.
You've been invited to do that?
No, I was invited to a conference on the history of science near Chicago at Notre Dame University this summer, which was a wonderful sort of workshop conference. I was an invited speaker there. And I thought, well, let's have something a bit different. I gave some technical talks, but we also went to the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and I gave the play there.
Do you think you're a good actor, like you're a good scientist? Or?
Well, I do. I have done in recent years a little bit of amateur acting as well, drama, so a few drama skills, and I quite enjoy doing that.
Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, it's been nice to talk to you anyway, and I mean, if I have any more questions, yes, but I can't think about any more questions at the moment, because I think, you are a very interesting person, and it's good to talk to you, and I gain more experience, more things that I never came across to. So what else can I say? Thank you very much for being with us, and our audience, I'm sure they're going to be happy because they learned something else. And I wish you all the best with your what you're doing now, the retirement and all this, and your play. And when you are in London, performing, let me know. I will come and see you, definitely 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Αυτά, κυρίες και κύριοι. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ και εσάς. Thanks very much for watching. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ που μας παρακολουθήσατε. Να ευχαριστήσω όμως και τον χορηγό μας, τον Δόκτωρα Βασίλη Μαύρου και το Βαρόσι Lettings και να σας πω ότι εγώ και εσείς θα είμαστε μαζί και πάλι την ερχόμενη Κυριακή την ίδια ώρα. Μέχρι τότε να είστε καλά. Till then, have a good night.